Hello, and welcome to the Campus Technology Insider Podcast. I'm Rhea Kelly, Executive Editor for Campus Technology and your host. When Boston University launched its hybrid learning initiative this fall, called Learn from Anywhere, the need for faculty support was top of mind. The institution provided training and coaches to help instructors redesign their courses and adjust their teaching for the new modality. But what about everyday troubleshooting and support during class? To help ensure that hybrid learning could run smoothly, BU created the Learn from Anywhere Classroom Moderator program, essentially an army of student workers deployed in the classroom to help faculty and make sure remote students are connected with the on-campus component of each class. Scaling a program like this for a university of BU's size, 30,000 plus students, was no easy feat. Hundreds of student moderators were trained and assigned to cover more than 2,000 hours of class time per week, all while working within the constantly changing safety guidelines of a global pandemic. For this episode of the podcast, I talked to Ernie Perez, Director of Educational Technology for BU Digital Learning and Innovation, and Jill Beckman, Executive Director of Client Services, about how they rolled out the Classroom Moderator service and made it a success. Here's our chat. Hi, Ernie and Jill. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
So to start, I thought maybe you could give me a brief overview of Boston University's Learn from Anywhere model. When did it begin and what's it all about?
Sure, so I can take that. Let's just kind of roll back the tape back to March. And when COVID hit, we went fully remote for the spring. And when we figured out that it was going to continue, we really started thinking about how we would implement the future here at BU. So we opted to go with something that we call Learn from Anywhere. And that's really what folks refer to as high flex or hybrid. The plan was for students to be able to be anywhere in the world to take their courses. And so what we needed to do was to make sure that the classrooms were ready for that. And so we took a three-pronged approach to do that. One was to update the classrooms to get them up to standard. So we were going to use Zoom for synchronous courses. So about 500 classrooms got upgraded to be Zoom capable. Then the second thing was to help faculty really get up to speed. So we worked with the colleges and departments to get coaches, faculty coaches. And so those faculty coaches, which were faculty from those departments that had specialized training. So they went through a little over a week, 2-week training with the Center for Teaching and Learning and with Educational Technology to get them ready to help their other faculty colleagues. And then the third thing was moderators. So we knew that the faculty were going to have their hands full teaching to basically two modalities, right? The students that were in the classroom and then those that were going to be remote. And so the moderator program really was there to help or aid faculty to bridge the students that were going to be remote with the in-classroom things that were happening in the classroom, so that whether it was chat or asking questions, etc., so that they would feel that they were part of the community.
So can you sort of detail what is the classroom moderator setup? Are these students? How does it work?
Okay, well, the moderators were students in the BU community. We immediately recognized that the only way we were going to be able to get this many people to additionally go and work in classes would be to leverage our own students and give them an opportunity to help with this initiative. So the very first thing we did was talked about, okay, well, how do we get the word out and how do we do this? So after we defined the role, we actually spent some time wordsmithing the description of it to make sure that it was clear and appealing to the students so they knew what they were signing up for. And even then, when we were very careful about how we set it up, we still had so many people that when they first applied, like sometimes we had to tell them 2 or 3 times, no, this is an on-campus this is an on-campus role, because at the time we were still fully remote and people just weren't quite understand. Not everyone understood right away. Okay, nope, this is going to be when we come back. You will be coming in and going into the classrooms and helping the faculty that way. So, yep, all BU students all day long.
And is this something? Is it like a working on campus job that they get paid for, or is it like
Yes.
a volunteer thing?
No, it's a paid position. We worked with the student employment office to get that posted, and there was a lot of work that we actually did to get the students onboarded, hired, process all their I-9s, all that kind of thing.
So what kinds of challenges did you anticipate faculty facing, and how were students the best solution to help?
So yeah, so I think that if you think about the number of classes, right? So BU has 30 plus thousand students, right? So it's going to be a lot of classes at the same time. And so we were really thinking about scale, right? So faculty can normally call a hotline if they have a classroom problem, and someone can get dispatched there to help them out when in need. But this was really going to be how many classes are happening at the same time, and they may need that support, right? So the idea behind this was that we needed someone to be able to help the faculty in the classroom when it's happening, and be able to assist those students that are remote and the on-campus students, right, to be it cohesive, right, so that the learning still continues. So we anticipated that faculty may have, a technical problem. Maybe a student's going to have a technical problem, and maybe it's just that the faculty member in the heat of things is lecturing, and they don't really have time to look down at their Zoom chat that the student has a question, right? So we really were trying to figure out how we could make sure that those remote students were just as seen as the student in the classroom raising their hand, right? So one of the ideas was that the moderator position could easily see the chat and see what was happening with the remote students, and they could raise their hand for those remote students, right? So they become that surrogate to be able to be noticed and seen.
That makes sense. And can you talk more about how you trained the student moderators? What were some of the things they needed to prepare for?
Absolutely. That was a really big part of getting ready for this launch. We ended up creating 16 different training modules that were online classes that they could sign up for and take to cover all kinds of different scenarios. So as we were creating our project team, we made sure we had subject matter experts in each of the things that we felt that the students would need training. So, training on Zoom, training on the different technology in the classroom, training on different setups that people might encounter in different areas of the campus. So, like the medical campus has specific things there, and we had a little segment on, how they were going to be set up, stuff like that. So, we made all those different sessions, and once the students were on board, all of this training was made available to them. But in addition to that, which was actually quite a challenge, we did set up and organize in person, not really so much training, because the pandemic made that really difficult to say. We could not put 400 students in a classroom and say, hey, we're going to teach you. But we arranged an in person experience so that students could go in and filter through the classrooms and kind of touch the technology and see it, because we knew that some of the students may have never been on campus before, or they haven't seen the new Learn from Anywhere setup. And I know if it were me, if I was doing something new, or I was stepping into a classroom with a faculty member, a bunch of students, I would not want it to be the first time I've walked into that room and seen that technology, no matter how many videos I've seen. So we had to do a lot of coordination because remember, while this was going on, separately, there's this whole initiative to make the campus safe. So there's all these different groups on campus figuring out what testing currencies were going to be, what the criteria was for students staying in place, what people had to do depending on what area of the country they were coming from. And amongst all that, we tried to set up this whole like environment where students were able to go and come to the classes, ask questions, get some hands-on experience with the technology as well. So we were able to do that, and I think most students got a chance to go. Not everyone did, because depending on where they were coming from, but a lot of them got to take advantage of it and said it was really helpful.
Yeah, so I guess the students coming from all over, were they sort of moving back onto campus in preparation for the HyFlex semester? Like, were they already around, or how did that work?
Well, BU has students that are local, and then they have students that come from everywhere. So this year, as part of the whole "Let's be safe" distancing initiative, there was much more of a staggered move-in process. So students, we had a longer period where smaller groups of people were coming in on campus and moving in. So that was definitely part of our coordination and training. So the students would sign up for when they would come into campus, and a lot of students live off campus too, right? And so when they live off campus, they're not in the residence halls. It's not really so much of a move-in as having them get involved and signed up into the COVID-19 testing program that they needed to do to be compliant and be able to continue to come to campus. So yeah, it was kind of like this staggered effort of students coming in, but that's really why we made the online training modules, right? So that no matter when they were moving in or getting to the Boston area, the majority of their training they could do as soon as they knew they were going to be a moderator.
What was the selection process? Like, what are the qualifications?
Well, we talked a lot about this, and we knew that if we said, okay, we need to hire Zoom experts, that there was really no way that we would be able to find enough students with that expertise out of the gate, right? So instead, what we really looked for when we were hiring and interviewing was soft skills, communication skills. So what we did is we said, okay, our goal is to hire students that have the communication skills, quick thinking, and really the ability to explain things simply and calmly to people, right? So actually, even before the pandemic happens, the IT Help Center, we hire and train a lot of students, or what we used to think was a lot of students before this happened. And a favorite question that we used to ask in interviews was, can you describe to us how you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, to someone who's never made one before? Because we can teach the technical skills. That's not a problem. But people do have to have kind of some inherent skills to be able to explain things to other people and communicate these things quickly, and have that type of those soft skills to be able to jump into that role. So that's really what we were looking for, and we asked those types of questions to kind of tease out whether they'd be comfortable with that. Technical knowledge was a bonus. Obviously, that was great if they had it, but we knew, we even put in the job description that we would be teaching that to them, that training would be available.
How many students are we talking about exactly?
Well, we interviewed over 850 students in an 8-week period.
Wow.
And we ended up hiring over 400 of them. So I think when we started, we had about 560 or so students on the payroll. Right now, at this point in the semester, there are about 400. And some people decide they don't want to do it anymore. They have other interests. Some of the classes switched to remote, and we didn't need as many hours, and things just constantly change. But that was, to put that into perspective. Like I said, we used to think that we employed a lot of student employees, and our average number was between 60 and 100 students every year. So switching from that to over 400 to 500 students, plus the additional students we regularly hired anyway to help with the other areas of our organization, it was a lot.
Yeah. And I imagine Scheduling them for specific courses must also be challenging, considering they have their own schedule of classes that they're attending in addition to this job. So how did that work?
That was a really tough problem to solve. So that's a really good question. So first, we had a bunch of criteria. So our schools expressed a strong preference for being matched with their own students. So like, for example, the College of Engineering really wanted engineering students to serve as moderators, feeling that that would be more of a benefit to the faculty. And that was a sentiment that we really heard across the board. Additionally, we have the students' own class schedule. Not only can they not moderate and be in class at the same time, but we have to think about where they are, right? Because if they're on one side of the campus, they can't get all the way to the other end in 5 minute in 5 minute switch. So we have to kind of make sure that that's spaced out because it's an in-person role. And then there, are limits on the amount of hours each student wants to work, that kind of thing. So what we did in the end is we actually partnered with our research computing group. We brought them into the project, and they helped us generate an algorithm that took all of the class data for all of the classes where faculty requested moderators and all of the schedules. They pulled all the schedules for the students that we hired to be moderators and matched them up. And then that was our initial schedule. So that was just so amazing that we were able to get that done. I can't even imagine where we would have been if we hadn't been able to do that. It was awesome. But even after we did that, it was a ton of work because schedules change all the time, right? So students have add drop period. The university schedule was still changing. We had situations where classes changed times or changed locations. And then you just have, the regular, student, I'm out sick today. I thought I could handle this, but I can't type of thing. I don't want to work here anymore. I need to focus on my schoolwork. So we had our initial schedule, but then on top of that, we had pieces of our team, dedicated to a daily process of checking for every gap. So we had very long hours, right, collectively, because we had to be up before the day started of any classes to make sure there weren't any gaps, make sure we contacted the on-call moderators and make sure that they knew where they were going for the day. And then we were regularly making adjustments as things changed throughout the semester. So we had moderators that worked. They had dedicated classes that they covered from the beginning of the semester to the end. And we actually ended up having a lot of students that enjoyed the flexibility where they didn't really take any dedicated hours, but they stayed on the payroll and kept picking up on-call hours just, if they needed the cash for the week or they felt that they had a little more bandwidth, because there always were some.
So how are moderators different from teaching assistants or other kinds of student positions in classes?
Well, before this happened, there was no such thing as a moderator. Like we created that role as part of Learn from Anywhere. So it's a specific, role with certain responsibilities. As part of the process, we actually decided collectively that faculty members who had TAs were not eligible to also request a moderator. So really, in essence, the best way to look at it is that the classroom moderator responsibilities, they are a subset of the TA's responsibilities. So what our TAs do besides serving as moderators in the class, it varies from school to program to faculty member. But as long as there is Learn from Anywhere at BU, a TA also does serve as a classroom moderator. So all the training modules were made available to them as well. So it's really the TAs are moderators, but the moderators don't do the extra responsibilities that TAs provide to their faculty.
Can you maybe share, what do you think has worked especially well about this initiative?
Ern and I were talking about this, and he may have some things to add about some of the other broader pieces of it. But when I think about the moderator program, it was such a whirlwind that it was almost hard to pick out one or two things that were really good or really problematic. Like it wasn't really like that. It was like there was always room for improvement, but the program was actually a pretty big success. We had so many concerns in the beginning that didn't even come to fruition, that we thought through, like, well, what if we can't find any students to hire? What if students don't want to do this? Are we going to have to go to try to find temps? Is the role going to be helpful? How are we going to have enough staff and time to handle all this? And really just what happened is we took everything step by step and kind of met and tweaked the processes as we went along. I do think the biggest things that really helped us be a success were, first of all, that the team already had experience with classroom support and student management, so we didn't have to start from scratch. And the other thing, uh, as cheesy as this may sound, maybe, is that, everyone, and I don't mean everyone on my team or Ern's team or ISNC, everyone at BU that we worked with was so enthusiastic and had a genuine desire to see this succeed. And it made a huge difference because everyone was so supportive. Everyone was willing to help and knew that it was a priority. People put in extra time, went the extra mile, and it made a huge difference. That I think was a big part of the success.
Yeah. Ernie, how about from your perspective?
Yeah, no, I think Jill's exactly right. So, when I think about the overall recovery committee that came up and requested the funds for the moderator program and the coaches program, we had a vested interest to make sure that it was a success. But from there, it was also going down to the associate deans, right? Making sure that the right faculty had requested moderators. For the faculty that requested moderators that weren't automatically given one because they had a TA. One thing that we didn't mention was that there was a minimum number of students that a faculty member had to have to qualify for a moderator. So in our case, for the fall, it was 20 students, but there were cases where they could apply for an exemption to get one, and for many of those we approved. But it was working with those associate deans, working with the faculty, working with the coaches. When a student needed something and we got an email, we immediately got it to the right person. When I remember, this is a vivid memory of mine. The first day of classes, we needed to get headsets to 400 students. So, and it just happens to be raining that day. And I remember going to a tent and handing out headphones to these students, right? Because we needed to get them to them. And there was a question, well, will the students show up? It's raining. And someone said they will be there. And I said, well, fine, it's my shift. So I went over there and I was handing out headphones to student moderators, in the rain. And it was a collective. It was the entire institution wanting to make this a success, right? So it was uncharted territories, but we were all willing to put in the time and the effort. I know that the Jill's team put, a tremendous amount of time from the get-go, right? From when the time that we said, here's the concept, to who's going to make this a reality, right? So because at the committee level where I was sitting, that we said, okay, well, in theory, this is the role, right? And this is how it should work. And here's what we think it's going to cost, and here's an approval. But when it went to Jill's team, it was, they really had to start thinking about, how are we going to get all these people, and we've already touched on a lot of these things. How are we going to train them? How are we going to schedule them? And there was just so many moving parts, but it really, it takes a village, right? And I continue to say that without everyone's help, the entire LFA experience at BU for the fall semester would not have been as successful. So I think that, and it was continuous improvement, right? Whenever we saw something wasn't quite right, whenever we saw something needed to change, everyone at the right level had the authority to make those changes, right? As it was going to make sure that it was going to be a success. And I think that everyone did that very well.
The flip side I always like to ask is, what did you try that just didn't work? Or maybe just needed improvement?
It's a funny thing with that because same kind of thing. There wasn't anything that just completely failed where like we went back and we said we just can't, like, we're not doing this in the spring. That didn't work, or this was a good idea, never mind. There really wasn't a lot of that, and again, I think some of that came back to the fact that we had already done the student management piece before. So we started at a place where we knew how to hire, we knew the skills we were looking for. We've done classroom support. So it was just really more about the scale and the scope and the communication and the logistics that was such a big deal. But I will say one of the things that I felt was the biggest challenge. And it's not really what we did, but remember, while all this was happening, so we're trying to learn from everywhere, off the ground, and make this vision happen. There is also very many areas of the university working on making the campus safe for when people come back at the same time. So we're doing this learn from anywhere program, but then we're also, and my team was involved with that too, working on setting up COVID-19 testing for the entire community. How often are they going to test? Setting up the symptom things, setting up the criteria for quarantine, isolation, stay in place, that kind of thing. And there were a few times when those initiatives kind of, where the COVID-19 compliance, the safety, which was, ultimate, because we weren't going to be able to be there if we couldn't say that the campus was safe, right? Where it went back and caused us to have to adjust on our end, especially when it came to requirements for increasing the testing and the amount of tests that students had to have before they could safely go to the classroom. And so, we've had situations where we're like, oh, we better go back and make sure that we have enough we have enough moderators. So for example, as the surge was kind of happening, we had a whole challenge about Thanksgiving because there was increasing concern, not just at BU but in Boston and Massachusetts and the United States, about what's going to happen when these college kids leave and come back. And so there were additional requirements, and we had to do a bunch of work to say, okay, hey, classroom moderators, who's traveling for Thanksgiving, who's going to be here, because there was additional guidance that was coming out for students that were going to travel for Thanksgiving, to the point where they would not be able to come back that first week and handle their shifts in their classes if they left campus. And so we had to adjust to things like that. And it was it's not that it didn't work, but it was, or anything like that, but it was by far our biggest challenge, I think, was adapting to those things, because sometimes it was just, oh, now we got to go and make sure we rethink that, because it was just things you could not plan for. That was the hardest part, is adjusting to things that kind of came out of nowhere just because of the situation where we've all been in this year.
Right, and the guidance just is constantly changing too.
Yep, constantly changing. And so you have the university reacts, and then the safety is the number one priority, and then I would say learn from anywhere is second. It's equal, right? But one follows the other. So we had to adjust our programs to whatever was coming out for the compliance and the safety. And so that would it was interesting. I am not the only person to say this, but I mean, can't stress enough how unique or crazy this year was.
So have you heard back from faculty? I'm sure they appreciate the service, but do you have like any sort of specific response from them you can talk about?
Yeah, so we actually were able to survey our faculty and our undergraduate students, as well as our graduate and professional students. And so the good thing, so I'll cut to the chase here, is that the faculty absolutely loved the moderator program. So if you look at the three top things that faculty were very satisfied with, was one, campus safety, two, the moderators, and three, the faculty coaches. So, if you think about LFA and, the different components, having the coaches and the moderators be top of the list, that's a pretty good indication that we did something right there. And I think that to go along with that is that it has been so successful that faculty really wanted them more, right? And so there's a conversation in the middle of the semester whether we should increase the number of moderators. So to really kind of respond to that for the spring semester, because this program is going to continue for this coming semester, we have taken out that minimum student requirement. So I mentioned earlier that there's faculty have to have at least 20 students in their class. So for the spring semester, there is no minimum. So it doesn't matter how many students are enrolled in your course, you can request a moderator. So that, I think that really speaks to the program, that the faculty have really enjoyed and are taking advantage of using those moderators because they feel that they have been useful in the way that we envisioned it.
So hybrid learning at BU is continuing for the spring. And how about post-pandemic? Is this a model that you see sort of becoming kind of a new norm? And would there be a need to sort of continue this moderator initiative going forward?
So that's the $1,000,000 question, right? And I only joke because we really don't know. That's the question. You can start thinking about, for our university, we're very heavily, we're a residential campus, so I think that will continue for undergrad population. Part of the experience is to come to campus and enjoy the co-curricular activities. We have a very high 4-year graduation rate. So I think that for us at BU, our residential education will continue and thrive. What does it mean for other programs, for graduate programs? What does it mean for professional programs? Uh, does a hybrid become, a larger scope, right? Before we used to think, well, there's online programs and there's on-campus programs. Will this hybrid really become, the next frontier? That's still, we don't know, right? That's yet to be determined. But I think that we've learned a lot in this process, right? That we can do it. Whether I think that there are other things that we really need to consider, right? The type of class, is it the right type of class? So it might be good for a lecture, but maybe not for a discussion, or maybe it's good for discussion and not for lecture. So I don't know that we have an answer for that. I think that we're keeping our eyes open, our mind open to see where we're really head. I think that I heard someone say the other day, well, now that you've offered it once, is it going to become an expected thing? And I don't know that we're to that point, but I think that we're listening, right? And I think that strategically, many institutions, not just BU, are really looking to see what is that future, right? And I don't think that we know yet. And what is this post-COVID higher education landscape look like? And I think it's too early to tell, but I think that some things will change.
Yeah, I guess we have to get over the hump with COVID first, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
That would be a good first step.
Yeah. So one last question, and I think I'll ask it to both of you, and maybe start with Jill. What's your advice for other institutions that are trying to support their faculty in the shift to hybrid teaching and learning?
Well, my big thing here would be to definitely listen. One of the things that we did really early on, and I was involved in some of these efforts, and I'm a big fan of surveys, asking questions, asking people what they think. And we did that quite a few times. We did it when we pivoted to fully remote. Are you ready? Do you have the technology? Do you have computers? Do you have bandwidth, to figure out where our gaps were? And we did it we did it in the afterwards in the summer, and then going into the fall, and then after the fall we've surveyed people and asked them, and to be really honest and clear with everyone that you're listening. Be genuine. Say, we know that not everything's perfect. We are all in this together. We want to hear your feedback, and do everything you can to get that feedback, because you never know what's going to come out of it. You can't address everything, right? But I think getting out there early and often, and sending out those surveys and kind of getting an idea of as much as you can, just as much information as you can, is really important, because you can get ahead of some things that way. And I think we did a pretty good job with that.
Yeah, that's great advice. Ernie, how about you?
Yeah, so I'll completely and 100% agree with Joe. You have to listen, right? So involve different folks from around campus. It takes everyone to do this. For example, if you know if we would not have had the division of IT that had the experience of hiring students at scale have this. I'm not entirely sure that we could have been successful. Conversely, I don't think that it would have been as successful if we didn't have the coaches helping the faculty think through how to use the moderators. And I also think that it wouldn't have worked well if the administration wouldn't have been on board, right? So it really does take everyone having the conversation of, what is our end goal and how do we get there, and really having the conversation, thinking it through, right? It's not just one thing. It's not just about the management of students. It's not just about the training of the student moderators. But it's making sure the faculty know how to use them adequately and appropriately, and that the faculty have really thought about how they're going to teach in this hybrid modality, right? Because you can't just take your class that you've been teaching for X amount of years in brick and mortar setting all remote or all hybrid. You have to change the pedagogy that you're using. And so I think that with that, you use those moderators and those other resources, just like the technology in the classroom, right? You have to be in the room that has the right technology. The same technology that works for a lecture classroom isn't going to work the same for a discussion based class. So I think that it takes the discussion and involving everyone, right? It's your ed tech folks, it's your help desk folks, it's your coaches, it's your Center for Teaching and Learning, it's your folks that may have been working on your MOOCs or fully online programs, to all come together and really think and talk about how to be successful.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Really enjoyed it.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Rhea Kelly, and this was the Campus Technology Insider Podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and Stitcher, or visit us online at campustechnology.com/podcast. Let us know what you think of this episode and what you'd like to hear in the future. Until next time.